The moments that we had to trust the Lord have been many. They started even before we got to the field, and it was when we had our first two children. They were just babies, and we were on the threshold of leaving to go overseas with the CMA. And we knew that part of the process would be that one day our children, who were at that point just babies, would have to go away to a boarding school if there wasn't a local option that was good in the place where we were going to be appointed. And so as we held them in our arms and thought about the future, we just couldn't bear the thought of sending these precious little ones that God had entrusted to us away to a place far away from us where somebody else would raise them, somebody else would nurture them and teach them. And we felt so strongly about that we decided to stay home in Canada instead of following the calling that the Lord had given to us as children ourselves to go overseas somewhere. So as we pastored a church here in Canada, we had a wonderful ministry and God was working, and yet in our hearts, we knew that even though all that we were doing was good, it wasn't what God had called us to do. And so finally, after 4 years, when the missionary came for our yearly missions conference in our church, God spoke to us, both Dan and me, individually, separately, through the message that the missionary brought. He wasn't talking about boarding schools or anything, but God spoke to us about this issue of trust. Did we trust God with our children? And we both had to say no. We didn't trust God that much. And yet we knew that God was sufficient. And so we confessed our sin of our inability to trust God with our children specifically, and renewed our commitment to following God wherever He would lead us, and trusting our children to Him, because after all, they were His, and we had dedicated them to Him, and we had given them back to Him many times when they were sick or whatever. We would entrust them to God again. And so we said, God, we do trust You, and wherever You send us, we will go. Whatever You ask us to do with our children, we will do, because we do trust You. And so we went to Guinea, and sure enough, our children did have to go away to a boarding school because there was nothing there that was locally suitable for them for school. And it was like our hearts were being torn out of our chests when we sent them away for that first time. But God was sufficient. We didn't think we could do it. I remember every time I thought about it before we sent them away, I would just be overwhelmed with this wave of sorrow that would come over me, thinking of them being so far away from us. And but when the time actually came, yes, there were a lot of tears, and we sobbed when we said goodbye to them. But God was sufficient in that when we came back home and our house was empty and both of the kids were gone, He kept His promise. His promise was that He would restore to us 100-fold what we had so-called sacrificed for Him. And it came in, His sufficiency in that area came about when He sent other young people into our lives, other children, other young people that we could nurture. There was that, and so He did provide 100-fold in that we have been able to mentor other children, other young people, Guineans and other MKs, missionaries' children, international workers' children. And at the same time, He has restored our own children to us 100-fold in that we have a wonderful, close relationship with our children. And we love to be together, and we treasure every moment that we have together. And also, He has brought two of our children, two of our four now, back to Africa to work again. Icing on the cake. We never expected that. But they are back in Africa working, not in the same country as us, but in Africa, what a thrill for us to have them back on the continent again. And so God has been sufficient in that. He has been with them every step of the way. He has brought people into their lives to enrich them and to teach them and to nurture them, godly people who have poured their lives into our children's lives and given them much more than we could have given them ourselves. And so we just have seen how sufficient God is for our children, for our family.